What would you do if you saw the person who taught you how to tie your shoes, who kissed your scraped knees, who gave you your first taste of kindness, now forgotten and begging on the streets? For one man, this wasn't a hypothetical question. It was a devastating reality that shattered his perfect world. He had everything: money, power, influence. But in one heart-stopping moment, he realized he had lost the one thing that truly mattered. His next move wasn't just about writing a check. It was about rewriting a life. This is a story that will challenge everything you think you know about success, gratitude, and the unbreakable bonds of the past. Get ready for an emotional journey of redemption that will leave you questioning what you would do in his shoes. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. This helps us bring more inspiring stories like this to you. The limousine glided through the rain-slicked streets of downtown Seattle like a silent, black shark. Inside, Elias Thorne, 42, scrolled through the quarterly reports on his tablet, the glow illuminating his sharp, focused features. A $3.4 billion net worth didn't manage itself. Every second was accounted for, every meeting a move on a global chessboard. He was en route to a groundbreaking ceremony for the new Thorne Tower, a 90-story monument to his own success. "Sir, traffic on 3rd is a nightmare. Protest of some kind. I'll take a detour through the International District," his driver, Mark, announced through the intercom, his voice slightly tense. Elias didn't look up. "Just get me there by 3:15, Mark." His tone was not unkind, but it was absolute. Efficiency was his currency. The limo turned down a narrower street, a stark contrast to the gleaming skyscrapers just blocks away. Here, the city showed its seams. Graffiti adorned boarded-up windows, and the air, even through the sealed car, felt heavier. Elias finally glanced up, his eyes scanning the unfamiliar scenery with mild distaste. This was not a Seattle. And then he saw her, a figure huddled under a torn awning, a cardboard sign trembling in her hands. A homeless person. A common sight, unfortunately. His security team had a protocol for donations to vetted charities. Direct engagement was a security risk he couldn't afford. He started to look away, to return to the comforting numbers on his screen. But something stopped him. A flicker of memory, faint and distant. The way the woman held her shoulders, slightly slumped but with a stubborn, invisible strength. A specific shade of gray in her messy hair. The delicate curve of her wrist as she adjusted the sign. His breath hitched. The limo slowed to a crawl behind a delivery truck. He was now directly parallel to her. His window was tinted, a one-way mirror to the outside world. He could see her clearly. Her face was etched with lines of hardship and exhaustion, pale and weathered. But beneath the grime and the years of struggle, Elias saw it. The high cheekbones. The kind hazel eyes that now looked hollow and defeated. And most of all, the small, faint scar just above her right eyebrow. A memory detonated in his mind with the force of a bomb. He was 7, trying to show off on his new skateboard on the cracked pavement of his foster home's driveway. The wheels hit a rock, and he flew forward, skinning his palms and knees raw. But the worst was his forehead, connecting sharply with the concrete. The world was a blur of pain and panic. Then she was there, scooping him up. Her voice, a soothing melody of a Cuban accent, whispered, "Mi niño, mi valiente niño. Let me see." She cleaned the cut, her hands gentle and sure. He'd needed 3 stitches. She'd held his hand the entire time, singing an old Spanish lullaby. He'd been so focused on her face, on the tiny cut above her eyebrow where the doctor had accidentally nicked her with the suture kit in the frantic moment. "Lo siento, Maria," the doctor had apologized. "It's nothing," she had said, her eyes only on a young, terrified Elias. "Just a little scar to match my brave boys." Maria, his Maria, the warm, vibrant woman who had been the only source of light in a dark and chaotic series of foster homes. She was the cook, the cleaner, the nighttime comfort for a dozen unwanted kids. But for Elias, she had been everything. His anchor, his protector. She had sneakily taught him to read using old newspapers, told him he was smart, that he could be anything. She'd been fired from that job when the agency found out she was spending her own meager salary on books for him. He never saw her again. It was a loss that had carved a hollow space in him that all the money in the world had never been able to fill. And now, 35 years later, she was here, on a cold street, begging. The world inside the limousine ceased to exist. The quarterly reports, the skyscraper, the billions. It all turned to ash. His heart hammered against his ribs, a painful, frantic rhythm. His mouth went dry. Stop the car. The words came out as a choked whisper. Sir, Mark replied, confused. Stop the car. Elias roared, his voice raw with an emotion Mark had never heard before. Pure, unvarnished panic. The limo jerked to a halt. Elias's hand fumbled for the door handle, his usually steady fingers clumsy and shaking. He pushed the door open, the sounds and smells of the street rushing in. He didn't grab his coat. He didn't think about cameras or security. He just stepped out into the drizzle, his $5,000 suit immediately spotting with rain, his eyes locked on the woman who had saved him and whom the world had utterly forgotten. The drizzle matted Elias's perfectly styled hair to his forehead, but he didn't feel the cold. He was numb, every sense hyper-focused on the woman 20 feet away. She was shivering, her thin jacket offering no protection against the Pacific Northwest damp. She didn't look up as he approached. Her gaze was fixed on the cracked sidewalk, a portrait of profound exhaustion and shame. Each step Elias took felt like wading through a dream, the sound of the city, the distant honking, the rumble of the delivery truck, muffled and distorted. His polished Oxford shoes navigated the puddles and grime of the alley, a world away from the plush carpets of his high-rise office. Maria? The name left his lips as a question, a fragile, hopeful sound that was almost swallowed by the urban noise. She flinched as if struck and slowly lifted her head. Her eyes, the same kind hazel he remembered, were clouded with film of despair and a deep-seated wariness. They scanned him, taking an impeccable suit, the watch that cost more than a house, the sheer aura of wealth that clung to him like cologne. Her expression didn't change. There was no recognition, only the defensive blankness of someone accustomed to being ignored or harassed by strangers. "Spare some change, mister," she mumbled, her voice raspy and tired, devoid of the warm, melodic Cuban accent of his memory. It was a flat, neutral tone of someone who had long since stopped expecting anything from anyone. The question was a physical blow. She didn't know him. The boy she had comforted, the child whose tears she had wiped, was completely erased. He was just another rich man in a limousine. The hollow space inside him, the one her absence had carved, suddenly felt like a gaping chasm. He knelt, right there in the wet filth of the alley. He went down on one knee, bringing his eyes level with hers. The action was so utterly unexpected, so devoid of the usual social barriers, that it finally broke through her shell. She recoiled slightly, her grip tightening on her cardboard sign. "Maria," he said again, his voice thick with emotion he couldn't name, grief, guilt, a love so old it ached. "It's me. It's Elias. Elias Thorne." He watched her face, searching for a spark, her brow furrowed in confusion. She was looking at him, really looking now, her eyes tracing the lines of his face. He could see the gears turning slowly, rusted from disuse and hardship. He was a man now, with a man's jawline and a man's presence. The scrawny, bruised 7-year-old was hidden deep beneath 3 decades of life. And then it happened. Her gaze flickered from his eyes to the space just above his left eyebrow. There, mostly faded but still visible if you knew where to look, was a thin, white line from his childhood fall. The scar that matched her own. Her breath caught. A tiny, sharp inhalation that was louder than the traffic. Her hand, rough and chapped, rose slowly, trembling violently as it hovered in the air between them. Her eyes widened, the haze within them clearing for a single, stunning moment, replaced by a dawning, impossible disbelief. "Mi niño?" The words were a ghost of a whisper, the Spanish accent returning faintly, a precious artifact unearthed from the ruins of her life. "Elias? My little Elias?" Tears welled in her eyes, mirroring his own. He couldn't speak. He could only nod, a single jerky motion. A sob escaped her, a raw and broken sound. "No!" she whispered, shaking her head as if trying to wake herself from a cruel dream. "No, it cannot be. Not like this. Not you seeing me like this." She tried to shrink away, to hide her face in shame, but Elias was faster. He reached out and gently took her cold, wether hands his own. He didn't care about the dirt, the damp, the eyes of his driver, who was undoubtedly watching in stunned silence from the car. "It's me, Maria," he said, his voice finally steady, filled with resolve that was absolute. "And you are not staying here another second." He stood, gently pulling her up with him. She was so light, so fragile. She stumbled, her legs weak from hours of sitting on the cold ground. He immediately wrapped an arm around her shoulders, supported her fully, his body blocking the wind. "Mark!" he called out, his voice echoing with a new authority. The limousine door swung open, and the driver rushed out, his professional mask barely containing his shock. "Sir, is everything—" "Open the door," Elias commanded, his tone leaving no room for questions. "We're leaving. Now." Mark scrambled to obey. Elias helped Maria into the luxurious, warm interior of the car. She sank into the soft leather seats as if her bones had turned to water, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and awe, staring at the opulence surrounding her, the polished wood, the crystal glassware, the sheer, impossible comfort of it. Elias slid in beside her and pulled the door shut. The sound sealed them in a silent, surreal bubble. The smell of rain and the street was replaced by the scent of leather and her unwashed clothes. The only sound was her ragged, shaky breathing. He turned to her. Her tears were flowing freely now, carving clean paths through the grime on her cheeks. She was looking at him, truly seeing him for the first time. "I lost you," she whispered, her voice cracking. "After they sent me away, I tried to find you. I tried for years." The revelation hit him with fresh force. She had looked for him. All this time, he had carried the grief of losing her, and she had carried the same weight. The story was so much bigger than this single moment on a street corner. It was a story of a broken system, of misconnections, of a kindness that had never been forgotten by either of them. He didn't know her story yet. He didn't know how she had ended up here. But in that moment, none of that mattered. All that mattered was the woman beside him. "You found me now, Maria," Elias said, his own voice rough with emotion. He reached over and carefully, reverently, took the damp, crumpled cardboard sign from her limp grasp. He looked at the handwritten plea for help, and his jaw tightened. He rolled down the window, just enough, and tossed out into the alley. It landed face down in a puddle. He turned back to her, meeting her stunned gaze. "And I am never, ever losing you again." The limousine glided away from the curb, leaving the grim alley and the discarded cardboard sign behind. Inside, the world was silent except for the hum of the engine and Maria's quiet, hiccuping sobs. She sat rigidly on the edge of the plush seat, as if afraid her dirty clothes would contaminate the pristine leather. Her hands, clenched tightly in her lap, were raw and trembling. Elias watched her, his billionaire's mind, usually racing through complex algorithms and merger strategies, was completely blank, overwhelmed by a primal need to fix this, to erase the pain etched on her face. He reached for the intercom. "Mark, divert to the Fairmont Olympic Hotel. Not the main entrance. Use the private port cochere on the side. Alert the general manager. I need the penthouse suite prepared immediately. No questions, no paperwork. We'll be there in 7 minutes." "Yes, sir," Mark's voice replied, crisp and professional, though laced with undisguised astonishment. Elias then turned his attention to the built-in console, dialing a number on his encrypted phone. His head of security, a former Special Forces operative named David Chun, answered on the first ring. "David, Elias, I have a situation, a personal emergency. I need a discreet, top-tier medical team to Suite 4200 at the Fairmont Olympic within the hour, a full workup. And I need a personal shopper, someone with tact and discretion, to be there with complete wardrobe, everything, sizes." Elias's eyes swept over Maria's small, shrunken frame. "Petite, small, just get someone who knows what they're doing." He ended the call without waiting for a reply. Efficiency, action, these were the languages he spoke fluently. But as he turned back to Maria, he saw that his commands, his sudden orchestration of a small army of luxury, were only terrifying her more. She was shrinking into herself, her eyes darting around confined space like a trapped animal. "Elias," she whispered, her voice trembling. "This is too much. I cannot, you should not." "It's nothing, Maria," he said, his voice softening, consciously stripping away the CO tone. "It's just a room, a warm room, and a doctor to make sure you're okay. That's all. Please, let me do this." He poured a glass of mineral water from the limousine's bar into a crystal tumbler and handed it to her. She stared at it as if it were a foreign object, then took it with both hands, the glass clinking softly against her chattering teeth. She took a small, hesitant sip. The limousine turned smoothly into the elegant, secluded driveway of the historic hotel. A phalanx of staff, led by a grave-faced general manager, was already waiting under the covered entrance, their expressions a masterclass in obsequious discretion. The door was open before the car had fully stopped. "Mr. Thorne, a profound welcome. Everything is prepared as you requested," the manager said with a slight bow, his eyes flickering over Maria for only a microsecond before returning to Elias's face, betraying no surprise. Elias ignored him. His focus was entirely on Maria. He helped her out of the car, his arm a steady support as her legs wobbled on the polished marble. The hotel staff parted for them, a silent, efficient honor guard. They moved through a private elevator that whisked them directly into the opulent, two-story penthouse suite. The doors opened onto a sprawling living area with high, ornate ceilings, panoramic views of the Puget Sound, and vases overflowing with fresh white orchids that had materialized in the last 7 minutes. A grand piano sat in one corner. It was a world of breathtaking, silent luxury. Maria stopped just inside the doorway, frozen. The sheer scale and grandeur of the space seemed to physically press down on her. She looked small and impossibly fragile against a backdrop of immense wealth. "This is a room," she breathed, her voice full of awe and fear. Before Elias could answer, there was a soft knock at the door. The general manager entered, followed by a woman in a chic, simple black dress carrying a portfolio, and behind her, 2 women with medical bags, their demeanors calm and professional. "Mr. Thorne, this is Celeste, our premier personal shopper from the downtown boutiques." "And Dr. Evans and her nurse," the manager announced softly before retreating. The sudden presence of strangers was the final straw for Maria. Panic flashed in her eyes. She took a stumbling step backward, her hand flying to her throat. The trauma of the streets, the deep-seated instinct to be invisible, to not be a bother, overwhelmed her. "No, please," she pleaded, looking desperately at Elias. "I don't need. I am dirty. I will ruin everything." Elias felt a lump form in his throat. He waved a hand, and the newcomers immediately understood, halting their approach. He walked over to Maria and knelt before her again, just as he had in the alley, ignoring the expensive rug. He looked up at her, making himself small, making himself the boy she once knew. "Maria," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "look at me. You could never ruin anything. You taught me how to read. You held my hand when I was scared. You kissed my scars. Please, let me help with yours. Just for tonight. Let them make sure you're healthy. Let them bring you some clean, warm clothes. That's all. I will be right outside that door the entire time. I won't leave." He was pleading with her. Elias Thorne, who negotiated with world leaders and corporate titans, was on his knees begging his childhood caregiver to accept a doctor's visit and a new set of clothes. Her panicked breathing began to slow. She searched his face, and this time she saw only the earnest, determined boy she remembered. The billionaire facade melted away, leaving behind the essence of the child who had trusted her completely. Slowly, hesitantly, she gave a single, tiny nod. Elias rose and nodded to the doctor and the personal shopper. They moved forward with a gentle, unhurried grace that spoke of immense skill. He gave Maria's hand one final, reassuring squeeze before stepping out into the private hallway, closing the heavy door behind him. He leaned against the wall, the adrenaline finally receding, leaving a profound exhaustion in its wake. He could hear the muffled, gentle voices from inside the suite. He pulled out his phone and sent a one-line email to his entire executive team and the event organizers at the Thorn Tower site. Unexpected personal emergency. All events indefinitely postponed. The cost was irrelevant. The shock replies that instantly flooded his phone were ignored. The only thing that mattered was on the other side of that door. The story of how she got there could wait. First, she needed to feel safe. First, she needed to remember what it felt like to be cared for. The door to the penthouse suite clicked shut, sealing Elias in the plush, silent hallway. He stood there for a long moment, his forehead pressed against the cool, painted wood, listening to the indistinct murmur of voices inside. He could hear the gentle, professional tone of Dr. Evans and the softer, reassuring words of the personal shopper, Celeste. There was no panic, no distress from Maria, just a low, steady hum of care, a wave of relief so powerful it made his knees weak washed over him. She was safe. She was warm. For the first time in what felt like hours, he took a full, deep breath. The sharp, acidic smell of the city rain that had clung to her clothes was gone, replaced by the hotel's faint scent of lemon polish and fresh flowers. He pushed himself away from the door and walked to the large window at the end of the hallway. It overlooked the hotel's inner courtyard, a manicured garden of green hedges and a bubbling fountain, a world away from the gritty alley. He pulled out his phone, its screen now lit with a frantic cascade of notifications. Emails, texts, missed calls from confused executives and anxious PR handlers. The machinery of his empire was grinding to a halt because he had simply walked away. He ignored them all. Instead, he called the one person who could handle this without questions. David Chun answered instantly. Medical team is 5 minutes out. Elias. Shopper is already en route with an initial selection. They're already here, David. It's handled, Elias said, his voice low. I need a different protocol now. Total privacy. No one gets on this floor. No hotel staff, no press, no one. The general manager seems competent. Make it clear to him that his discretion has a very significant value. And I need information, but it has to be done with the utmost care. Understood. What are the parameters? Elias watched the water dance in the fountain below. Her name is Maria Flores. She was a caregiver at the Willow Creek group home in Portland in the late 80s. I need to know everything. What happened after she left there? Where has she been? How did she end up in Seattle? I need a full background. But David, this is not due diligence for a merger. This is fragile. Use people who are good with people, not just databases. I don't want to scare anyone who knew her. I want to understand. Consider it done, David replied, his tone shifting from security chief to loyal friend. We'll be a ghost. As he ended the call, the suite door opened. Dr. Evans stepped out, closing it softly behind her. Her expression was professional, but carried a weight of compassion. Mr. Thorne, she began. She's physically dehydrated and malnourished, as expected. There's a minor frost nip on her fingers and toes, but no permanent damage. She's exhausted to the point of collapse. Mentally, the trauma is significant. She's disoriented, deeply ashamed, and anxious. But, the doctor added, a small, respectful smile touching her lips, she's also remarkably resilient. She asked about you twice. She's worried she's putting you out. Elias's heart clenched. What does she need? Rest. Safety. Consistency. No more surprises today. The best medicine right now is a hot meal and a long sleep in a real bed. The shopper is helping her into some pajamas now. I've left some vitamins and a mild sedative to help her sleep if she agrees to take it. I'll return tomorrow to check on her. Elias thanked her, and she left with a quiet nod. A few minutes later, Celeste emerged, her eyes shining. Mr. Thorne, she's all settled, she said softly. We found some very soft cotton pajamas and a robe. She cried when she felt the fabric. She kept saying it was like being hugged by a cloud. Celeste blinked quickly, composing herself. I've taken a full list of sizes and preferences. I'll have a complete wardrobe delivered by morning. She's a lovely woman, sir. Truly lovely. Soon, Elias was alone in the hallway again. He waited another 10 minutes, giving her time to adjust, to breathe. Then he took a deep breath and knocked softly on the door. "Maria, it's Elias. May I come in?" A faint "Yes," came from the other side. He pushed the door open slowly. The living room was empty. He found her in the master bedroom, sitting on the very edge of the enormous four-poster bed. She was dwarfed by it. She wore a simple pair of white silk pajamas and a matching robe, and her damp hair was combed back from her face, which was now clean and showed the gentle, kind features he remembered, though etched with deep lines of hardship. She looked both older and younger at the same time. She wasn't looking at the panoramic views of the city lights. She was staring down at her own hands, now clean, resting in her lap. "The doctor said you should eat something," Elias said gently, gesturing to a rolling cart that had been brought up, laden with a simple bowl of chicken broth, some soft bread, and a pot of tea under a cozy. "May I sit with you?" She nodded silently. He brought the cart over and sat in a chair beside the bed, pouring her a cup of tea. The silence between them was heavy, filled with 35 years of absence. She picked up the spoon, her hand still trembling slightly, and took a sip of the broth. She closed her eyes for a moment, as if savoring not just the taste, but the simple, profound normalcy of it. When she opened them, tears were welling again, but they were quieter now, less frantic. She looked at him, really looked at him, in the soft light of the bedroom. "Elias," she whispered, her voice raspy but clearer. "All this for me? Why?" He reached over and carefully covered her hand with his own. "Because you once gave a lonely, scared boy a book and told him he was smart. Because you kissed a cut on his forehead and told him he was brave." His voice broke slightly. "Because you were the only mother I ever knew, Maria. And a son looks after his mother." The word hung in the air between them. Mother. It was a truth they had both felt but had never, ever spoken. A single tear traced a path down her cheek and fell into the bowl of soup. She didn't try to wipe it away. She just turned her hand under his and laced her frail fingers through his strong ones. It was an acceptance, a bridge across the decades. She didn't tell her story that night. She didn't need to. In that quiet, held handshake, a promise was made. The story would come. But for tonight, they would just be Elias and Maria again. And that was enough. The penthouse was steeped in the deep, velvety silence of the very early morning. Elias had spent the night in the spacious living room, stretched out on a sofa that was more comfortable than most beds, but sleep had been a fleeting visitor. His mind was a whirlwind of fractured memories and urgent, half-formed plans. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the two versions of Maria, the vibrant woman of his childhood and the shattered soul on the street, superimposed over one another. A soft sound pulled him from his restless doze. It was a careful, hesitant pad of bare feet on the marble floor. He sat up quickly. Maria was standing at the threshold of the living room, silhouetted against the floor-to-ceiling windows that were just beginning to blush with the first hint of dawn. She was clutching the silk robe tightly around herself, her posture still timid, but her eyes were different. The raw, animal panic from the day before had receded, replaced by a weary, profound curiosity. She was taking in the room, the art on the walls, the grand piano, the breathtaking view of the waking city. "You are awake," she said softly. "You did not sleep in the bed." It was a statement tinged with concern, as if she felt guilty for displacing him. "The couch is incredible," he said, stretching and offering a warm smile. "I've slept in worse places on private jets." He immediately regretted the casual mention of his extravagant life, but she didn't flinch. She was just watching him, as if trying to reconcile the man with the boy. He stood and walked to the kitchen, a sleek masterpiece of stainless steel and marble. "Can I make you some coffee? Tea? There's a machine here that probably does things I don't even understand." A small, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. Coffee would be a miracle. As he fumbled with a sophisticated espresso machine, she drifted over to the windows, drawn to the light. She stood there, a small, still figure against a vast, awakening urban landscape. The Space Needle was visible in the distance, and ferries began their first runs across the gray sound. "It is like being on top of the world," she whispered, more to herself than to him. He brought her a mug of steaming coffee, fixed just as he vaguely remembered she liked it. with a little milk. She took it with both hands, inhaling the aroma as if it were a sacred offering. They sat across from each other on the luxurious sofas, the low table between them. The silence was no longer heavy with shock, but was filled with the immense, unspoken history that lay between them. Elias knew he had to tread carefully. He would not push. He would let her lead. She took a slow sip of coffee, closing her eyes in simple pleasure. When she opened them, she was looking directly at him, her gaze clear and steady. "You asked me why," he said gently, recalling her question from a night before. "But the question I've been asking myself since I saw you is, how? How did you come to be there, Maria?" She took a deep, shuddering breath, as if steeling herself to dive into deep, cold water. She set the mug down carefully, its click against the saucer, the only sound in the quiet room. "After Willow Creek, after they sent me away for buying you those books," she began, her voice low but clear, the Cuban accent weaving through her words like a faint melody. "It was hard. I had a good reference. But not for that. Too emotionally involved with the children, they said." She gave a sad, hollow laugh, as if love was a failing. She spoke of a series of low-paying jobs, cleaning offices, working in laundries. She had married young, to a kind man named Carlos. For a while, life was stable, even happy. They had a small apartment. She thought perhaps she could start her own family. "Carlos, he got sick," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "His kidneys, the doctors, the treatments, it was so much money. We had nothing. We sold everything. I worked 2, then 3 jobs. It was not enough." Elias listened, his heart a cold, hard stone in his chest. He could see it unfolding like a terrible, inevitable tragedy. He passed away 10 years ago. The medical debt, it did not die with him. She looked down at her hands, now clean but still telling the story of a lifetime of labor. "I lost the apartment. I worked where I could, but I was always so tired, and I was getting older. No one wants an old woman to clean their buildings." She spoke of a slow, agonizing slide. A rented room became a weekly motel. The weekly motel became a shelter bed when she could get one. The shelter became a doorway when she couldn't. "I came to Seattle because I heard there was work. A fish cannery in Alaska was hiring people for the season through an agency here. I thought one last try, but when I got here, the positions were gone. The agency kept my last money for a processing fee." She shook her head, the memory still bitter. "I was stranded. I had nowhere to go, so I stayed. You learn where the safe places are, which soup kitchens are best. You learn to be invisible." She said it all without self-pity. It was just a fact, the story of her life. A story of bad luck, of a system with no safety net, of a series of small, crushing setbacks that piled up until they formed an insurmountable mountain. Elias could not speak. The guilt was a physical pain. While he was building a billion-dollar empire, attending galas, and buying skyscrapers, she was fighting for a bed in a shelter. The woman who had given him the foundation of his humanity had been stripped of her own. He saw the moment her strength had finally broken. It wasn't one big thing, but the accumulation of 1,000 small losses. The loss of her husband, her home, her dignity, and finally, the hope that things would ever get better. She looked up at him, her eyes glistening. "I thought of you, sometimes. I would see a young businessman on the street and wonder if that was you. I always prayed you had gotten away from those places. I prayed you were happy." A tear escaped and traced a path down her cheek. "I never wanted you to see me like that. I am so ashamed, Elias." That broke him. He moved from his chair and sat beside her on the sofa, taking her hands in his. "You have nothing to be ashamed of," he said, his voice fierce with emotion. "The world failed you, Maria. I failed you, but that ends now. Do you understand me? It ends today." The silence that followed Maria's story was not empty. It was dense with the weight of her truth. Elias held her hands, feeling the delicate bones beneath her skin, a stark contrast to the immense, unyielding resolve solidifying within him. The vague, emotional need to help was gone, replaced by a cold, precise, and furious determination. This was no longer about sentiment. It was a mission, a correction of a profound cosmic error. He gently squeezed her hands. "Stay right here." He stood and walked to the other side of the vast living room, pulling his phone from his pocket. The first light of dawn was now streaming into the penthouse, painting everything in a soft, golden glow that fell at odds with the grim reality they had just unearthed. He dialed David Chun. "Elias," David answered, his voice alert. He'd clearly been waiting for the call. "I need the team in the conference room downstairs in 1 hour," Elias said, his voice low and stripped of all emotion, the voice he used when dismantling a rival company. "Legal, financial planning, real estate, and social services. The best we have on retainer." "Social services?" David repeated, slightly thrown. "You heard me. And David, tell them to bring their A game. This is the most important merger of my life." He ended the call and turned back to Maria. She was watching him, a new kind of fear in her eyes. Not the streets, but the sheer, terrifying force of his world. "Elias, what are you doing?" she asked, her voice small. "What I should have done 35 years ago," he replied, his tone leaving no room for argument. "We are building a new life for you. Not just a room. A life. And we're starting right now." An hour later, they were seated at the head of a long, polished mahogany table in a private conference room on the hotel's mezzanine level. Maria was beside him, wearing a simple but elegant navy blue dress and a cream-colored cardigan that Celeste had delivered that morning. She looked nervous, clutching a glass of water with both hands, but she held her head high. Around the table sat 6 of the sharpest, most expensive minds in the Pacific Northwest. A renowned estate lawyer named Susan Wright, a financial wizard, Ben Carter, who managed portfolios for old money families, a top real estate agent, Chloe Davies, who specialized in discreet high-end properties, and 2 women from Premier's senior advocacy and social services firm, introduced as Ms. Evans and Dr. Rivera. They all looked politely curious, professionally neutral. They were accustomed to Elias's demands. But 7 a.m. meeting in a hotel conference room with an elderly woman of clearly modest means was unprecedented. Elias didn't waste a second. "Thank you for coming. This is Maria Flores. She is family." The simple declaration landed with the force of a gavel. "Our objective this morning is to design and immediately implement a complete life plan for her. Security, stability, and happiness are the only KPIs. Money is no object. Time is of the essence." He looked at the social services advocates. "Ms. Evans, Dr. Rivera, your first priority. Maria has significant medical debt. I want it identified and paid in full by the end of today. All of it. Every last cent used my liquid accounts. I want the documentation of discharge sent to this room by 5 p.m. The 2 women blinked, then quickly began scribbling notes. "Of course, Mr. Thorne. We'll need some details from Ms. Flores, but we can start the process immediately." He turned to the financial planner, Ben. "Ben, I want a dedicated trust established for Maria. A generous monthly allowance for living expenses, discretionary spending, whatever she wants. I also want a separate no-limit account for medical care, wellness, and security. You are to be her personal financial concierge. She calls you directly for anything she needs." Ben nodded, a smile touching his lips. It would be an honor, Maria. Next was the real estate agent, Chloe. "Chloe, we are looking for a home, not an investment property. A home, single level, preferably, a garden, a quiet, safe neighborhood in the city, close to amenities but private. Find 3 options for us to tour this afternoon." Chloe's eyes widened slightly at the timeline, but she recovered gracefully. "Absolutely. I have several properties in mind that might be perfect." Finally, he addressed the lawyer, Susan. "Susan, I want you to draw up documents granting Maria full and permanent medical power of attorney, and including her as the primary beneficiary in my will, right after my sister's children." This finally made Maria gasp. "Elias, no, I cannot accept that." He turned to her, his expression softening for the first time since the meeting began. "It's not a negotiation, Maria. It's a fact. You are my family. This is what family does." He looked back at the assembled team, his gaze sweeping over them. This is not a discussion. This is a briefing. You have your assignments. I expect updates every 2 hours. Let's begin. The room erupted into a quiet, efficient hum of activity. Laptops were opened, phones were produced, and lo, urgent conversations began. Maria sat in the eye of the hurricane, watching as the machinery of immense wealth was deployed with surgical precision to dismantle the prison of her poverty. One of the social workers gently approached her with a tablet. Ms. Flores, whenever you're ready, we can start listing the names of the medical providers. We'll take care of it all. Maria looked from a woman's kind face to Elias, who was now listening intently to the real estate agent describe a potential property with a rose garden. The fear in her eyes began to melt away, replaced by a dawning, staggering disbelief. She wasn't being given a handout. She was being given back her life, piece by piece, debt by debt, document by document. The man she had once comforted was systematically rebuilding the world around her. And for the first time in over a decade, Maria Flores sat up a little straighter, took a sip of her water, and began to speak. The conference room, once a chamber of sterile corporate strategy, had transformed into the headquarters of a personal revolution. For Maria, the blur of the next few hours was a surreal montage of kindness and efficiency. She spoke softly with Dr. Rivera, recounting the names of hospitals and clinics that existed only as monuments to her fear and loss. With each name she provided, she could see the woman inputted into her tablet, attaching the immense, neutralizing power of Elias's wealth to each forgotten debt. It felt like watching a miracle performed by spreadsheet. By mid-afternoon, the team had dispersed to execute their missions, leaving Elias and Maria alone in the quieting room. The emotional toll of the day was etched on Maria's face, a deep exhaustion behind her eyes. "You need to rest," Elias said, his voice gentle again, the CEO persona receding. "And I have a meeting I cannot postpone. It will only take an hour. Will you be all right? Celeste can stay with you." Maria offered a tired but genuine smile. "I do not need a babysitter, Elias. I think I would like to just sit by the window. There is so much to process." He arranged for a car to take him to his office, leaving 2 discreet security agents stationed down the hall to ensure her absolute privacy. Back in the penthouse, Maria wandered to the living room window. The city below was bustling, a world of purpose and motion. She, who had been invisible in that world just yesterday, was now perched above it all, in a silent, luxurious bubble. The disconnect was dizzying. Her gaze fell on the elegant writing desk in the corner. On it sat a hotel notepad and a pen. An impulse, sudden and fierce, took hold of her. She needed to do this now, before the new reality he was building for her softened the edges of the old one. She needed him to understand that it wasn't just a story of loss. It was a story of what had been lost. She sat down, adjusted the lamp, and began to write. The words did not come slowly or hesitantly. They poured out of her, a torrent of ink and memory. "My dearest Elias, you asked me how, but I need you to know the who. You knew me as Maria, the caregiver, but I was a person with a life, with dreams. I need you to see that, so you understand what your kindness truly means." She wrote about her childhood in Havana, about the scent of orange blossoms in her grandmother's garden. She wrote about meeting Carlos, a young mechanic with a smile that could light up the Seattle gloom, at a community dance. She described her tiny apartment, the one with the leaky faucet she always meant to fix, and the balcony where she grew tomatoes in pots. She wrote about the devastating silence that filled their home after his diagnosis, the slow-motion avalanche of hope giving way to despair. She wrote not with self-pity, but with the poignant detail of a novelist, painting a vivid portrait of a life that was simple, but full of love and dignity. "We dreamed of visiting Cuba together one day. He wanted to see the sea where I learned to swim. We saved for years in a little blue tin box. When he got sick, that was the first thing we opened. It was not enough. Nothing was ever enough." Tears blurred her vision as she wrote, dotting the expensive paper. She was excavating a self she had buried long ago under layers of survival and shame. She was so absorbed in her task that she didn't hear the suite door open. Elias had returned sooner than expected, his meeting having been ruthlessly truncated. He stepped into the living room and saw her at the desk, her shoulders hunched in concentration, the soft scratch of the pen the only sound. He paused, not wanting to interrupt. He saw the intensity on her face, the tear tracks on her cheeks. This was private. He began to retreat, silently. But as he turned, his elbow brushed against a small decorative side table, knocking a crystal figurine to the thick carpet with a soft thud. Maria jumped, startled, and instinctively covered the notepad with her arms, like a child hiding a diary. Her eyes were wide with a flash of the old fear. "I'm so sorry, Maria," Elias said quickly, his heart aching at her reaction. "I didn't mean to scare you." She relaxed slightly, lowering her arms to reveal the written pages. "It is all right. I was just writing." He approached slowly. "What are you writing?" She looked down at the pages filled with her looping cursive. "My story," she said softly, the parts one could not say out loud. "For you, so you would understand that the woman you found, she was not always that woman." Elias felt a lump form in his throat. He could see the raw vulnerability on the page. This wasn't a list of facts. It was her soul offered up to him. "You don't have to," he began, but she shook her head. "I want you to read it," she said, her voice gaining strength. "But not now, when I am finished. It is a gift, the only one I have to give you." He nodded, respecting the sacredness of the moment. "It is the most valuable gift anyone could ever give me," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Just then, his phone buzzed. It was David. Elias answered, his eyes still on Maria. "Elias." David's voice was uncharacteristically tense. "We have a problem. It's the press." Elias's body went rigid. "What about them?" "A tip came in. Someone at the hotel, or maybe a staffer from one of the firms this morning. Someone talked. There's a rumor spreading on a local gossip site. They're calling it a mystery of the heart or some garbage. They have your name, the hotel, and a description of Maria. They don't have the full story, but they're sniffing around. They're calling it a rags to riches romance. They've got all wrong." Elias's jaw tightened. He looked at Maria, who was watching with concerned eyes, unaware of the storm brewing. She had just begun to feel safe, to emerge from her shell. The thought of cameras, of lurid headlines speculating about her, of her painful past being turned into public entertainment, it made him see red. "David," Elias said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous calm. "Lock it down. I want every person who was in that room this morning re-signing an NDA under penalty of ruin. Buy the gossip site. Buy the whole company if you have to. I don't care what it costs. Nothing gets out. No one gets to her. She has been a public spectacle for the last time. Is that clear?" On the other side of the line, David understood the absolute finality in his boss's tone. "Crystal clear, sir." Elias ended the call and took a deep breath, composing his face into a calm mask before turning back to Maria. The sanctuary he had built for her was under threat, and he would become a fortress to protect it. The calm in the penthouse was deceptive, a thin veneer over the furious activity Elias had set in motion. He ended the call with David, his expression carefully neutral as he turned back to Maria. The last thing she needed was to feel the pressure of the outside world crashing in. "Everything all right?" she asked, her perceptive eyes noting the slight tension in his shoulders. "Just business," he said, offering a reassuring smile. "Always something. How is the writing coming?" She looked down at the notepad, her fingers tracing the words she'd written. "It is freeing and difficult, like visiting a house I used to live in. Take all the time you need," he said. "I have some calls to make in the other room. Order anything you like from room service. The world is your oyster." He retreated to the study, closing the door behind him. The mask of calm dissolved instantly. He called David back. "Status." "The general manager is being extremely cooperative. He values the hotel's relationship with you more than a tip fee from a reporter. The team from this morning is being contacted, forcefully. As for the website, Seattle Snoop, it's a small operation. The owner is already considering our very generous offer to purchase his entire operation. He's just haggling over the number. Don't haggle. Give him what he wants. Add a bonus for his immediate and permanent silence. Then shut the whole thing down Elias commanded, his voice cold. I want that story erased from the internet. Every trace. On it, Elias paced the length of the opulent study. It wasn't enough. Containing the story was damage control. He needed to be proactive. He needed to create a narrative, a fortress of truth so solid that speculation would bounce off it. And he knew exactly how to do it. He scrolled through his contacts and found the number for Eleanor Vance. Ellie wasn't a PR guru. She was a storyteller, a former journalist for a major newspaper. She now worked exclusively with a handful of elite clients, crafting their legacies with nuance and integrity. She answered on the second ring. Elias Thorne, this is a surprise. I usually hear from you around merger time. This is different, Ellie. This is personal. I need your help, and I need complete discretion. You have it. Always. What's the situation? He told her. He didn't give her the corporate version. He gave her the human story. He told her about the 7-year-old boy, the caregiver who was fired for kindness, and the devastating encounter on the street 35 years later. He spoke of Maria's dignity, her husband Carlos, the medical debt, and the life of quiet struggle. His voice, usually so measured, wavered with emotion. On the other end of the line, Ellie was silent for a long moment. Elias, that's the most powerful story I've heard in my career. A story is already trying to leak. A salacious, wrong one. I won't have her victimized again. I want to control this. I want to tell the real story. But I need to do it on our terms, in a way that protects her completely. You want to do a profile, Ellie said, her journalist mind already racing. But not about you, about her, a tribute. We position it as a story about unseen heroes and the enduring power of gratitude. We partner with a reputable outlet. I'm thinking a major magazine, not a tabloid. We grant them exclusive access, but we have full approval over the piece and the photographer. We focus on her strength, her resilience. We make her the hero of the narrative. Yes, Elias said, relief flooding through him. Exactly. But Ellie, she has to agree to every word, every photo. This is not for me. This is for her. To give her back her story. Understood. Let me make some calls. I'll get you options by tonight. He ended the call feeling a sense of momentum. He was no longer just reacting. He was building a future. He left the study to check on Maria. She was dozing lightly on the sofa, the notepad resting on her chest, her pen still in her hand. The sight filled him with protective tenderness, so fierce it stole his breath. Later that evening, as they shared a quiet dinner of roasted chicken and vegetables, Elias broached the subject carefully. Maria, he began, choosing his words with care. The world, it sometimes takes an interest in my life, and now in yours, because you're important to me. She set her fork down, her expression wary. The reporters? There was a small rumor. It's been handled, he said quickly, but it made me think. Your story, the story of you and Carlos, of your strength, it's important. It deserves to be told the right way, not as gossip, but as a tribute. He laid out Ellie's idea. He emphasized the control she would have, the respect of the outlet, the chance to honor Carlos's memory, and show the reality of people struggling in the shadows. Maria listened silently, her hands folded in her lap. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time, looking out at the city lights. You would let me decide? She asked finally. I could say no. Without a second thought, he said firmly, this is entirely your choice. She took a deep breath. Carlos, he was so proud. He hated people knowing he was sick. He hated being a burden. Her eyes welled with tears. But he was not a burden. He was my love. And what happened to us, it happens to so many people. They feel ashamed, like we did. They feel invisible. She looked at Elias, a new determination squaring her shoulders. If I can tell our story, the true story, and it makes one person feel less alone or makes one person with money think to help someone like Carlos, then yes, I will do it. It was Elias's turn to be stunned. He had expected reluctance, fear. He had not expected this profound courage. Are you sure? He asked. She nodded, a single, decisive motion. I have hidden in shame for too long. You have given me a home. Perhaps I can use this voice you have given me to give something back, to say that our lives mattered. In that moment, Elias didn't see a victim he had rescued. He saw the strong, compassionate woman he had always known, finally stepping back into the light on her own terms. The student was still learning from the teacher. The plan was no longer just about protection. It was about empowerment, and it was far more beautiful than he could have ever imagined. The morning of the interview arrived with a soft, diffused light filtering through the penthouse windows. A different kind of energy filled the space, one of purposeful calm. Elias had ensured everything was perfect. A renowned journalist from a respected national magazine, a woman named Sarah Jones with a kind face and a gentle demeanor, was set to arrive at 10. A discreet photographer would follow later, only if Maria felt comfortable. Maria was quiet at breakfast, stirring her tea absently. The courageous resolve she'd shown days before had been replaced by a nervous anticipation. "What if I say the wrong thing?" she fretted, her hand trembling slightly as she set the spoon down. "What if I forget? I am not a famous person. I am just me." Elias reached across the table and covered her hand with his. "Sarah isn't coming to interview a famous person. She's coming to interview you. Just you is exactly who she wants to talk to. And just you is more than enough." At precisely 10 o'clock, there was a soft knock. Sarah Jones entered, not with the brash energy of a reporter on a scoop, but with the respectful air of a guest. She greeted Maria not with a handshake, but with a warm, genuine smile. "Ms. Flores, it's an honor to meet you. Thank you for being willing to share your story with me." Elias retreated to the study, giving them complete privacy, but leaving the door ajar just enough to hear the low murmur of voices. He heard Sarah's questions, asked softly, and then Maria's voice, hesitant at first, then growing stronger, more fluid. She spoke of Cuba. She spoke of Carlos. She spoke of the backbreaking work and the soul-crushing fear of debt collectors. She spoke of the coldness of the streets and the surprising kindness of strangers. She did not shy away from the pain, but she didn't dwell in it either. She spoke with a poet's eye for detail and a survivor's hard-won wisdom. Elias listened, his heart aching and swelling with pride. She was magnificent. After 2 hours, Sarah emerged, her eyes slightly red-rimmed. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "That was one of the most profound conversations of my life. She is a remarkable woman. The story will be a tribute, I promise you." The photographer, a quiet man named Ben, arrived in the afternoon. Maria was initially shy in front of the camera, but Ben had a way of making himself disappear. He didn't pose her stiffly against the skyline. Instead, he captured her as she was, sitting by the window, looking at the city with a new, contemplative expression, tending to the orchid Elias had sent up, smiling softly as she spoke about Carlos. The article was published online a week later, with the print version to follow. The headline was simple and elegant: "The Caregiver's Karma, How a Life of Quiet Strength Inspired an Unlikely Reunion." It was not on the front page of the magazine's website. It was featured in a special section dedicated to stories of humanity and connection. Elias sat with Maria in the living room, a tablet open on the coffee table between them. He held her hand as they read it together. Sarah had been true to her word. The piece was beautifully written, honoring Carlos's memory, detailing Maria's struggles without exploitation, and framing Elias's actions not as those of a savior, but of a grateful son finally finding a way to repay an incalculable debt. The photographs were stunning and dignified, capturing the essence of her resilience. The public response was immediate and overwhelming, but it was not the frenzied, speculative gossip Elias had feared. The comments section, the social media shares, the emails that filtered through Ellie's office, they were filled with emotion. "This made me cry on my lunch break. Thank you for sharing this. My mother went through something similar. This story makes her feel seen. I'm a caregiver, and this is the most beautiful thing I've ever read. Mr. Thorne, thank you for reminding us what truly matters." People weren't fascinated by the billionaire. They were moved by the human connection. They saw themselves in Maria's struggles and in Elias's longing to make things right. A few days later, a simple, handwritten letter arrived at the hotel, forwarded by Ellie's office. It was addressed to Maria. The return address was from a small nonprofit organization that advocated for healthcare debt reform. Maria opened it carefully. Inside was a letter from the executive director. Dear Ms. Flores, your story has deeply touched everyone at our organization. Your courage in speaking about the devastating impact of medical debt has given a voice to millions who suffer in silence. Because of your willingness to share, we have received an unprecedented number of donations and offers of support. You have started a national conversation. We know your struggle was not chosen, but your decision to speak about it is changing lives. You are a beacon of hope. With our deepest gratitude, the team at Americans for Medical Fairness. Maria read the letter once, then again, her hands shaking. She looked up at Elias, tears streaming down her face, but they were tears of joy, of purpose. They are listening, she whispered, her voice filled with awe. Elias, they're actually listening. She wasn't just a subject of a story anymore. She had become an author of change. The woman who had been rendered invisible for a decade was now seen by a nation, not for her poverty, but for her profound strength. The narrative had been, the view from the wraparound porch was not of the Seattle skyline, but a tranquil, cerulean Puget Sound cove. The house was a modest single-level craftsman bungalow, painted a soft sea green with white trim. Its true luxury was not in its size, but in its details. Wide, accessible doorways, radiant heated floors, and a sprawling, meticulously tended garden bursting with roses, lavender, and, in a sunny corner, a small, thriving patch of tomato plants. It was Maria's house, not Elias's house where she lived. Hers. The deed, the keys, the choices of paint and pottery. All hers. She stood on the porch now, a light sweater wrapped around her shoulders, watching container ship glide silently across the horizon. 6 months had passed since the article, since the world had briefly learned her name and then, respectfully, allowed her to retreat back into a cherished privacy. The doorbell rang, a soft chime. She smiled to herself. Elias still hadn't gotten used to the fact that he could just walk in. He always rang, treating her home with a reverence that touched her deeply. She opened the door to find him holding a bag of fresh pastries from her favorite bakery. He was dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, a world away from the man in the limousine. "You're just in time," she said, ushering him in. The air inside was filled with a rich, comforting aroma of slow-cooked black beans and rice. Frijoles negros and arroz congri, a taste of the home she left behind decades ago. I made a lunch. They ate at the small table in the sun-drenched nook overlooking the garden. They talked easily about the book club she'd joined, about the stubborn rose bush that was finally blooming, about his sister's children. The specter of the past was still there, but it no longer dominated the room. It had been acknowledged, honored, and gently laid to rest. After lunch, Elias brought out a small, wrapped gift. "For you." Maria gave him a mock-stern look. "Elias Thorne, you have given me a home, a garden, and a life without fear. You cannot keep giving me presents." "Humor me," he said, his eyes twinkling. She unwrapped the package to find a beautiful leather-bound journal, its cover embossed with simple, elegant rose. Tucked inside the front cover was a business card for a literary agent, along with a note that read, "Just in case you ever want to tell more of the story, on your terms." Maria ran her fingers over the soft leather, her vision blurring with tears. He wasn't just giving her a book. He was giving her permission to have a voice, indefinitely. He saw her not as a project completed, but as a person still unfolding. "Gracias, mi niño," she whispered, using the old term of endearment that now felt natural and right. He reached across the table and took her hand, his own strong and sure. "No, Maria." "Thank you. You think you needed saving. But you saved me. You saved me from becoming a man so obsessed with building towers that he forgot the people inside them. You brought me back to myself." They sat in a comfortable silence, the only sound the distant cry of a gull and the rustle of leaves in the garden. The journey had come full circle. The billionaire had not just saved his caregiver from the streets. Together, they had saved each other from different kinds of poverty, one a material, the other a spirit. They had built a bridge across a 35-year chasm, and on that bridge, they had found a rare and precious thing, A second chance at family. The story of the billionaire and the beggar was over. What remained was simply the story of Elias and Maria. And it was just beginning. This story showed us that our past never truly leaves us, and that sometimes the most profound transformations begin with a single moment of recognition. It's a powerful reminder to look beyond the surface, to honor our connections, and to never underestimate the impact of a simple act of kindness. If this story moved you, if it inspired you to believe in second chances and the power of human connection, then do us a favor. Subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. It helps us reach more people with stories that matter. And we want to hear from you. What would you have done in Elias's shoes? Have you ever had a life-changing reunion? Share your thoughts and your own stories in the comments below. Your experiences inspire our community. Finally, turn on notifications so you don't miss our next video. We're dedicated to bringing you powerful narratives of hope, resilience, and the everyday heroes who walk among us. Thank you for watching. Remember, kindness is a currency we can all afford to spend. See you in the next story.